Hey there, and welcome to the CMMC Compliance Guide Podcast. I'm Austin.
And I'm Brooke.
From Justice IT Consulting, where we help businesses like yours navigate CMMC and NIST 800-171 compliance. We're hired guns getting companies fast-tracked to compliance. But today, we're here to give you all the secrets for free, so if you want to tackle it yourself, you're equipped to do so. Let's dive into today's episode and keep your business on track. Well, Brooke, today we're going to do something a little different.
Sounds good to me. Let's do it.
Instead of breaking down a single topic within CMMC, we're going to answer some of the most common questions we've collected. We hear from small machine shops, aerospace suppliers, and the like.
So it's going to be 3 hours long, right?
Yeah. I've tried to aggregate them all into major questions, but there are, a good list of questions here. These are the questions that they're asking when they're trying to understand how CMMC will impact their business. Many of these companies are trying to get ahead of compliance, but they're stuck because the requirements don't always seem clear.
What?
Yeah.
That shocks me.
Surprise. So today, we're going to walk through the real questions suppliers are asking and the answers they actually need to hear, whether they like it or not.
Exactly.
So let's start with one of the biggest questions we hear from small aerospace suppliers, machine shops, manufacturers, when they're trying to prepare for CMMC. They're trying to prepare for CMMC, but don't know what their customers will require yet. They don't know if their contracts will involve FCI or CUI. They don't know if they'll need level 1 or level 2, and they don't know how far the requirements will flow down the supply chain. So how can a small supplier realistically plan on cybersecurity before those requirements seem clear to them?
That's a very good question. So if I tell you I need to buy a new car, what are you going to tell me? You going to tell me what kind of car to buy?
Depends if I'm selling it, I guess.
There you go. Yeah. Exactly. It depends on your perspective, right? If I'm a truck guy, I might tell you to go buy, a Ford F-350 King Ranch, or if I'm a sports car guy, I might tell you to go buy, a Shelby Cobra, or, who knows? But it really, the answer is it depends. So if you're just getting into this and you're trying to figure out where to go, but you don't have any contracts yet, it depends on your risk tolerance, and it depends on it depends on your risk tolerance, really. Are you willing to invest a lot of time and a lot of money to get some CMMC level 2 contracts? Because that's really where it's going to be. I don't see, the government says, we're not trying to pare down the DIB, the Defense Industrial Base. We're not trying to pare that down. We want everybody to be compliant. We're good. We don't want to hurt that ecosystem. And while they may not want to, I think
they used to say that they'd pay for it.
They used to, yes, and they will still say that it's accounted for. But there's several factors to that. We could discuss that. That's another rabbit hole. But really, what is going to end up happening is there's going to be fewer CMMC level 2 certified suppliers to the DoD to service all those contracts. So if you get certified early, or at least not late, I should say, then you have a lot better of a chance of getting those contracts more easily. The DoW, Department of War, actually comes out and says that. The primes will tell you that. So they want people certified. They need people certified. I hear from primes all the time that either people we know or through communications that we're looped in with our clients, through email or phone calls or whatever, we hear about this all the time. And primes are saying, look, if you're this close, if you'll schedule your level 2 certification and get that, you'll win contracts more easily. So hurry up, come on and do it. Right. So the realistic view is that there's going to be fewer suppliers there. And if you're willing to put in the time and the effort and the money, I should say the money, because it will cost you. then I think you're going to be in a really good position. So the first thing would be to figure out where you want to be exactly. If you have no clue and you're trying to position yourself, then you probably want to be as ready as you can, and that would be a level 2 certification, and just consider that you'll be handling some sort of dissemination restricted information. So, for instance, like ITAR, International Trade and Arms Regulations. So, there's certain hoops you have to jump through for ITAR. On the technology side, as far as CMMC goes, really, it means no foreign citizens can have access to any of that data. So,
which is harder than it seems.
It is harder than it seems, absolutely. So, for instance, if you got a Microsoft 365 tenant, you already can't use commercial, so you have to go to at least Microsoft 365 GCC. But if you're subject to any of those dissemination restrictions, specifically ITAR, no foreign, stuff like that, that pushes you up into the GCC high. That's depending on what licenses you look at. It's somewhere around 3 or 4 times more expensive than commercial. So it can be significant, right? And that's just an example of one of the things you need to look for. You don't have to have Microsoft 365 GCC high. You can do it without, as long as you scope and design right. But point is, you need to think about all that ahead of time. And if you want to be ready and you want to get those contracts, then position yourself for handling CUI with dissemination restrictions, CMMC level 2 certified. Other than that, if you already have some of those contracts and you're trying to figure out where in the world you need to be because nobody's clear, then you need to figure out what kind of data you have. Do you have any CUI? If you don't have any CUI, if you truly don't have any CUI, then you might just have FCI, which is CMMC level 1, right? So you need to figure out what kind of data you have, or what kind of data you will have or may have or want to be capable of having. So maybe you have level 1, maybe you just have FCI data right now, but you want to get some of those level 2 contracts. So you might want to go ahead and shoot for some of those level 2, no foreign ITAR type contracts, right? So you've got to figure that out first. What kind of data you do have or what kind of data you want to be able to handle, right? Once you do that, it makes the path a lot clearer. What I can also say about that is 2 things. One, there's hardly anything marked right now, but they are getting a little bit better at it, but a little. And if you're listening and you can't see, I've got my fingers very close together, so almost pinched together, saying very little. But yeah, there's very little that's coming out that's actually marked. People, and we talked to some people at Lockheed and some of the other. Well, I shouldn't even say Lockheed. So sorry, pretend like I didn't say anybody's name. It's the same across all of the primes. They think that you talk to certain people on the inside, they're like, yeah, we mark everything, and I'm. Not that we are a subcontractor of a prime, but we talk to them all day long, every day, and they're telling us we don't see anything that's marked, or we see very, very little that's marked. So there's a disconnect there. But the government realizes that. They're trying to get better. We'll see. So what the next thing is, if it's not marked, do you think you have CUI, and why do you think that? Well, it's because of the defarce clauses on my contracts. That's why I think that. That's very valid. If your prime is telling you have to be level 2, that's a good reason. It's also okay to ask, what is CUI? Is this document sent really CUI? Or I think this is CUI. Why is it not marked as CUI? And they can help you out. I know you don't want to bite the hand that feeds you, but it's okay to ask. Just be respectful about it. But it all boils down to, what kind of data do you have, or do you want to be able to support?
Yeah. I was thinking while you were talking, it'd be really funny to bleep out Lockheed. Just, every time we say Lockheed, just bleep it out.
I know. In our area, they're they're the 800-pound gorilla. I guess maybe that's not a good phrase either, but they're a big contractor around here. So they show up a whole lot. So they come to mind very quickly.
Maybe we'll do that in editing.
And I think they're only 20 minutes away from here. So of course, I think there's a bunch of other contractors, primes that are not very far away from here too. So
we are in a hub, that's for sure.
Yes.
Speaking of primes, and sorry, I'm the marketing guy. I can't help myself. But we are working on getting one of the big boys or representatives working there is probably a more accurate term to say. Way to say it, but we are working on getting some primes on the podcast, so that way we can kind of get their perspective and what they might say to the small mid-size supply chain out there. So hopefully we get that. Stay tuned. That is in the works. So, and we're also working on another assessor, C3PA organization coming in as well to get that perspective. So just a little teaser for future episodes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm looking forward to both of those. The gentleman from the prime, at least one of them that I know that you're looking at, we've worked with, we know him, and he'd be a great one to have on the podcast. So keep an eye out for that one.
Yeah. The question we kind of just went over was essentially talking about, how do you plan for compliance without knowing? And I think in my, simplistic brain, it's, the government basically is just raising the barrier to entry for their suppliers, right? Their supply chain. There's, the increasing level of, CMMC is going to start being required on new contracts before you can even compete for it. So that's just the unfortunate new reality that we're going into. So naturally, people look for very creative ways to make that burden or barrier of entry as low as they can, and as they should, right? And the reason I'm bringing this up and making that connection is that question that we hear a lot, we hear from people, is that, if they have drawings or CAD files or documents or whatever else, that, there's some people saying out there that if you just remove the customer name or program information or some pertinent, details like that, from the drawing or the document, that it's at that point, once it's redacted, stops being COI. Is that true?
No, I'd be really careful with that one. If you can redact enough information off that for what you have to be considered a commercial off-the-shelf product, then you might have an argument. But if you're just deleting the customer name, maybe the part number or original part number, or you're mixing and matching part numbers, I wouldn't play that game, because if something happens, it's relatively easy to figure that out, right? What we're trying to do is keep China basically from just at a simplistic view, keep China, Russia, all them from getting all our been able to copy all of our military tools, right? All of our stuff. So the
we don't
F-35 and the J-35, Humvees, the laser systems, all that kind of fun stuff. We're losing billions of dollars a year, and probably trillions of dollars over a few years of all this stuff to China, for instance. And they always bring up China because China's really good at stealing stuff. So, but that's what they're trying to prevent with all this. So, if somebody can hack in and get some drawings and go, well, gosh, there's no company name on this, I guess it's no use, No, they kind of figure out that, you've got some, you do work for one of the big primes, and, they got these drawings here, and, oh my gosh, they look like they might be a part to an F-35. Look here. So they can figure those things out, right? So, but all that to say, just redacting a couple of things off that specs or drawing or whatever it might be, I'd be very careful about that, saying that that's not CUI then. another way I might point this out is G code. All G code is instructions. Go here, do this. Go here, do that. For a CNC machine, for instance, right? That's all it is. Are those considered CUI? Because it's not what the government sent you. It's not you took that and you made it. Yeah, but you made it in accordance with that contract for that contract. And it can be related to what you're making. So, it's just instructions for a machine, but when somebody puts those instructions together, they can still figure that out, right? So that G code, and this will be a big argument too for lots of folks out there, because it's been an argument for quite a long time. But
also one of our upcoming episodes.
Great. So, go look up Jim Gopal, and he's been in and around CMMC for a long time. He's been counsel for Future Feed and some other places, and anyway, he's written some books on it, and basically he says that G code is CUI, right? So not that his word counts, but he says that. Lots of other assessors say that. The Cyber AB has had him on before to specifically talk about that. Not that the Cyber AB can make that determination, but I'm trying to lay out that has some authority on the subject. So if he says that about G code, simply deleting, a couple of things off a drawing, a couple of bits of information is not going to make it not CUI, right?
Yeah. When you step back from the nuance and arguments, and everything else, and you just look at, what's the intention of CMMC and what are we trying to achieve here? If you come at it from that lens, then a lot of these workarounds, or people might call them loopholes or whatever else, if you judge it against that lens, then you can kind of make an assumption as to how the Department of Defense or Department of War might see it, right? Mm-hmm. And so sometimes or at least from our perspective, it's better not to pick certain fights, and it's easier just to go with what the intention of what is, trying to be accomplished, rather than work around on, the little details or nuances, because you're just, at the end of the day, you're going to be more successful with it, we think, and really just implementing it as it's intended is going to get you a lot farther in the long term.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's safe to say that redacting information from drawings and whatnot, we would say probably not, the go-to move for making stuff not CUI.
Correct.
Yep.
Not that 100% of the time won't work. I'm sure there are some instances where you can make it work, but I would not depend on that. I would not at all depend on it.
Yep. So another question that we have a lot is, and it's one that we mention a lot, that people typically like to skip to implementation. And so
just get it done, right? Just jump in there and get it done.
Get it done. Yes. So basically the question is, can tools make you compliant? Right. So typically they'll mention some of the, more notable tools in the space, or other ones that, accomplish the same thing. Some that come up a lot are Prevail, Threat Locker, stuff like that. Can I just buy these and they make me compliant?
Well, you named one of my favorite ones, Threat Locker. That's a really good tool. But the short answer is no, they can't make you compliant. Prevail is great. Love Prevail. Some of these other solutions are great. But you have to realize that they don't fit every scenario perfectly. In fact, they don't fit hardly any scenario perfectly. And so each of those tools can absolutely be part of your solution. But most likely it's not going to be all your solution. And I'm talking about things like, CMMC in a box type solutions. You might call Prevail one of those. And I don't mean to dump on Prevail. I like Prevail. It's a great solution.
We counsel a lot of our customers to use them.
Yeah. So, it's a good solution. You just got to know all these solutions, how they fit into your environment, how they can fit in, Microsoft 365 GCC High, that's great. Does it fit in your environment, and will it completely work for you? You got to figure all that out and figure out where it fits in, where it doesn't, what solutions might be better than the others, because you can't just say, take this one solution and it works for everybody, right? Or it works for 75% of everybody. There's hardly any solution that'll fit into any environment and be the solution for CMMC. We deal a lot with manufacturers, and when you're really talking about all this, this is the defense industrial base. So you're talking about manufacturers and construction. There are a lot of companies out there that don't necessarily do the construction or do the manufacturing. Maybe they just handle the data, and there's a lot of CMMC in the box solutions that will fit them. Absolutely, 1,000%. But when you start getting into the majority of the DIB, they won't fit neatly in one of those solutions. So you really got to plan it out and figure out, what all you need out of a solution.
Yeah. So buying a tool to be compliant is like buying eggs to make a cake, right?
Yeah.
So
you need eggs.
You need eggs, certainly, but eggs alone don't make a cake, right? It's, it takes a whole recipe, right? So eggs
takes
is one
a whole
of the
recipe.
Required ingredients, but you have to preheat the oven. You have to mix it a certain way. If you don't mix it well, it's going to be clumpy. There's all of these steps in the process to make a good cake, and your compliance is just like that. And if you miss a certain spot, it's going to be runny or taste like crap or be dry or and so all those eggs matter. Certainly a requirement, but it is a small piece of that puzzle.
Absolutely, and there can be easy cakes to make, and there can be complex cakes to make. There can be big cakes and little cakes. So, hey, your cake example works pretty well, actually.
Hey, I got a good one every once in a while. I think this is your favorite question. This next one, when I probably should have made this the first question, to be frank, because it is probably the most common answer. I don't know.
Yeah.
We always say this is one of the most common, and I think we say that about all the questions, but this is probably the most common, when you start keeping tallies. And that question is, how much does CMMC actually cost, right? It's one of the biggest unknowns, and companies hear wildly different numbers.
Mm-hmm.
The DoD or DoW has their numbers, and then you go source quotes and you hear a big range from a bunch of different people, and then you have, you just hear everything, and there's solutions, 10 different ways to solve your compliance concerns. So how much does CMMC realistically cost?
So you can't even say that with a straight face.
I can't say it without laughing, yeah.
So, and this is not to make fun of people that ask that question.
It's a very legitimate question.
It's a very legitimate question. People want to know, do I even have a remote chance of affording this, right? And so I was going to say that's a $64,000 question, but it's likely a lot more than that.
That's just the assessment.
Yeah. So when you consider, your assessment is going to start off, we generally tell people, small manufacturers, to think about $60,000 as a beginning point for those assessments, right? They can be less than that. And they very well may be less than that, but I'm not going to tell people to budget less than that, because until you get in and you figure everything out and you know who you're hiring, and if prices have gone up by the time they get there because of the surge pricing or whatever it may be, it may be $60,000, it may be less, maybe a little more. It depends on your environment too. But a small manufacturer, I would intend on spending at the very least, $60,000 for an assessment. Could be 35. I doubt it. Could be 65 or 70. If it's more complicated, it can get more than that. But if there's multiple sites, but we're talking a small single site manufacturer, I'd plan on $60,000. Then, and this is just for the certification.
That's every 3 years.
That's every 3 years, right? Once every 3 years. So just for the certification. Then I would suggest, since this is a first go at it for everybody, I would suggest a mock assessment. And a mock assessment is a same thing as a certification assessment, except they don't do the certification part. They do everything just the same. They just don't upload it to the government. They come back and they say, okay, here's how you did. Here's what are the controls that are met and not met. Here's why. We can't tell you how to fix it, but we can tell you why it's not met, right?
It's an expensive pass-fail.
An expensive, yeah. So,
but a low-stakes way to proceed.
Yeah, and we've gone over why you should do a mock assessment before, we can go over it again, but we highly suggest a mock assessment as well. So generally, see-through PAOs do those different ways. Okay, but generally, if you schedule a mock assessment and an assessment with a see-through PAO, the mock is generally 50%. So maybe $30,000, for a mock assessment. Again, small manufacturer, single site, right? Then if you have if you happen to have an MSP or something that's helping you, you've got to consider their time. And their time is going to be, there's going to be some sort of fee, project fee to go through that, because there's a lot to get together.
An MSP or your consultant, or for the same person. So it could be two people you're paying or one.
Right. So I would figure somewhere around another $30,000 to $60,000 for that. And this is just for the assessment.
And the reason for that is the sheer amount of evidence that has to be prepared for, and then they have to sit through the assessment with you, not for you. So there's a lot of labor there that you should account for, is what I'm saying.
So just for that assessment, once every 3 years, or the first time at least, you're talking $120,000 or so, right? Just for the certification assessment, which is about on par with what the government said. But then you've got to figure in, really depends highly on your environment and what you're going to do to get there. There's going to be a big time investment, either on your part or on your part and with somebody else, a third party, an ESP, to come in and help you get there. So you could probably overall figure another 100. It really depends, but you could probably figure another 100,000 there. Getting servers in place, getting your network split up and VLAN'd off, getting a enclave in place, whatever it may be, and getting all that stuff in place. You're probably going to need some more cybersecurity type tools, different ones than you have right now. You may find that you need Microsoft 365 GCC High. You may want to do your whole tenant, or you may want to do a separate secure tenant for that. Again, that's all part of scoping, and you can figure that out. But we're talking $120,000 or more, possibly less, but wouldn't necessarily budget on less for the assessment, and then maybe this is a wild. There's a wild range, or a wide range here, but maybe 100,000 to get ready. But it depends on how you're doing that. If you have an MSP helping you, and they're going to be monthly services, what all there's going to be. But it's a huge range that there could be. But it is an investment, and it's an investment in time and tools. That time can be yours, or it could be somebody else's. And if it's if it's yours, depending on if you have people that if you already have CMMC level 2 experts, then maybe your time is not going to be that as expensive as hiring somebody in. But if you don't already have experts and they have to go through and become that CMMC expert, then you better get ready to start sending them to conferences, sending them to training, all that kind of fun stuff. And their time you pay them for is gonna grow. It's not just implementing it; it is learning CMMC. So you pay for that expertise one way or the other. and the amount of time, that buffer time you have for that, you need to consider. So all that's a wild, or I keep saying wild, but all that is a wide range of costs and time input. And you're either paying your employees for time or you're paying a third party for time. If you're paying a third party, you're generally shortcutting that experience timeline because it'll take quite a while for internal employees to become CMMC experts. Anyway, there's a large investment there.
So you're always going to have your preparation costs, right? Whether you do it internally or externally with a consultant, right? So that'd be general planning, documentation, policies, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Then you probably have to swap or replace some of your cybersecurity tools, maybe some vendors that you have. So those are probably going to be considered ongoing costs. And then you may have some implementation costs that,
absolutely,
like a Windows 7 machine that's sitting on the line, or an old server old server version in the server room that needs to be replaced or something. That's kind of the X factor, right? That, could be wildly, it could be small, could be really big. And then you have, to have some period of time in which you are doing everything, perfectly to a T, right, for evidence. And then you have to collect all that evidence, put it up into an evidence package, and then go through an assessment, right? And
right.
So every step of the way, you're going to have, vendors or internal people to pay for to do that, right?
Right. Yeah. And the other caveat I might add is, the assessment, the certification assessment is once every 3 years, like you said, but you won't necessarily have to pay for that mock assessment every 3 years. Now, if you have some substantial changes, it might be smart, but the second go around through this, if everything's relatively the same, maybe just more growth or something, but your environment is the same other than that, then your next certification assessment, you ought to be in a lot better position for it. There'll still be a lot of getting ready for it, but you ought to know at that point what flies and what doesn't. And so the mock may not be necessary in subsequent certifications.
So that naturally leads us into the next question, which is, can small companies do CMMC themselves?
Well, yes, they can do it themselves. But it goes to one of the things I was saying just a minute ago is, do you have that internal CMMC expert resource, right? Or do you want to make them? Make one of your you want to help somebody be a CMMC expert. And if you're going to do that, that's fine, but you got to realize it's going to be a big time investment. You can't just send them to a class and go, you're good to go. It's a lot more than that. Once you go to class, you really have to, going to class teaches you, the controls and how assessors look at those controls, and how they assess them and everything. But it doesn't teach you how to implement those controls in a manufacturing company that has, 50% of their contracts are DIB and 50% are commercial, and they run everything all on the same lines. And, oh, by the way, they have what you mentioned. They have a Windows 7 computer that controls a
cutting machine.
$300,000 machine. And no, they're not going to buy a new $300,000 machine. So you have to figure out what you're going to do with that. It doesn't fit all that, and you have to figure all that out, right? You have to figure out what's okay and what's not. And, one class does not teach you that. So CMMC conferences, the time investment of listening to and understanding the Cyber AB town halls are a good thing to listen to. Training, CCP training. You can do the RP training, the registered practitioner. I would say that is very, very basic and a beginning. That does not an expert make, believe me. It helps kind of get your feet wet, but that's about it. The RPA, the Registered Practitioner Advanced, but the RP Advanced is the next level above the RP, and I don't exactly know what all the RPA entails. I've not taken that one. I've not talked to anybody that has. Supposedly, it's more in depth and better example of what needs to be done. For CMMC. However, when you start getting into the CMMC Certified Professional, the CCP, that's when you start getting into really understanding how an assessor looks at these things, right? If you can do that and maybe do a CCA, a CMMC Certified Assessor, whether you actually become an assessor, that's a different story. But if you're just trying to learn everything you can to make sure you really understand, at least taking that CMMC Certified Assessor training would be a good thing. So as you can see with all this training and going to some of these conferences, chatting and yucking it up with a bunch of CMMC geeks, as fun and exciting as that may be, you learn a lot doing that. So there's an investment in time, an investment in training for somebody internally.
And a cocktail budget, you're saying?
And and a cocktail budget. Yes, that would help. Absolutely, yeah. If you're going to come talk to me at a conference, it does help for you to bring me a cocktail. So loosens things up.
McAllen.
McAllen, there you go. McAllen and Balvenie maybe. But or you can just bring me a free drink from from the show floor. Just kidding. But we
do say down here in Texas, the best beer is cold beer.
The best beer is cold beer. That's right. Exactly. So, if you're going to do it internally and do it yourself, you really have to invest in some training to do that. And a lot of reading, a lot of understanding, a lot of really delving into processes and how your business does all this. And if you take your estimator or your quality guy and say, hey, go learn CMMC and implement it, that's probably not going to work unless you invest a whole lot of time and say, you know what, your quality job or your estimator job that you were doing, that's now secondary, and we're going to hire somebody else to do that. Your primary is CMMC. Then it might start to begin to work, right? But not even there. And then you have to figure out what tools, are acceptable and what are not. And what handles SPD, what handles CUI, what doesn't, you have to figure all that out. So there's a lot to it. And then, the other part of that is once you really understand all that, now you got to write some policies. You got to write some procedures and some plans. And, you got to gather all your lists. And what do your lists need to look like? What does your policy need to look like? What does, are you going to draft all that from scratch? Or are you going to use somebody's policy templates? And I would say be very careful using somebody's policy templates.
Verbatim.
Not even verbatim. Just, a lot of them don't really address all of the controls, and a lot of them mix procedure or plan into policy. And it depends on how you want to write them too, I guess. But anyway, you've got to write all those policies and plans and procedures and all that kind of fun stuff. So there's a lot to it. And if you're a technical person and you're not generally, if you don't hear me on this podcast, I say as few words as possible, to get a point across, and I write as few words as possible. All my documentation that I write is going to be bullet pointed, short, sweet, to the point, just get the point across and be done with it, right? It's not necessarily how policies should be. So, if you start writing policies and you're like me and you don't like, it's very few words, you're going to have to figure out how to expand on things and really get the point across, right? So sometimes in those cases, policy templates do help. It helps get that thought process started, but do not depend on those policy templates to address everything. You're going to be highly customizing them. I can almost certainly guarantee you that.
So that's a good segue into the next question I've got for you, which is what does the day-to-day workload look like for someone that's DIYing their compliance?
Well, so it depends on how you implement, right? There's all sorts of things. You got audit logs need to be reviewed. Your of all your systems, your visitor log needs to be reviewed. You're on some sort of scheduled basis, maybe not daily, but there's a lot of things that need to be done quarterly or annually, that you need to make sure to get done and get documented. Your SSP needs to be reviewed. Your what you're logging needs to be reviewed. There's all sorts of stuff that needs to be reviewed. So some of that's on a daily basis, some of that's on a quarterly basis, and some of that is annually, but it needs to be reviewed. You need to show proof that you actually do these things and that you actually are managing the environment, because that's what this is all about, is ongoing management of the environment, not that you put some stuff in place and you completely forget about it and you dust the binders off whenever the auditor comes in. That's not how this works. And if you do that, you'll probably fail the assessment. So there's all sorts of daily things that needs to be done, and daily, quarterly, on a schedule, right? Daily, quarterly, annually, that need to be done. When people are onboarded, you have a new user. Do you have an onboarding procedure? Do you have a checklist? Do you have proof that you went through and gave them the access they're supposed to have? Do you have authorization for that? There's all sorts of things you need to have documentation for, and that are just on the daily workflow of things that, as a new user comes on, you need to remember, oh, hey, HR is requesting a new user be set up. I got to go through my handy dandy little checklist here and make sure that I get everything done, So there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done on a recurring basis.
So another common assumption that we hear or question as well is that companies should start with CMMC level 1 and then work their way up to CMMC level 2 at a later date. Is that the right approach?
There's another it depends one, right? So it can be. If you don't have any contracts that you know of that have level 2 compliance, any DFARS rules that say you need to be level 2, then that may be a way to go. But if you do, then you need to do a gaps assessment. I would say getting level 1 first and then going level 2 is not necessarily the direction you want to go. You really want to do a gaps assessment, see where you're at, see where you need to be, figure out. Part of that gaps assessment is going to be, what kind of document, what kind of protected information do I handle? Is it FCI? Is it COI? Are there dissemination controls on it, like no foreign or ITAR or something like that? Ear data, what is there? What kind of data do I have that needs to be protected? Once you figure that out, you do your gaps assessment and figure out where you're at. Then you can start putting a plan together of where you need to be, or where you need to be at that point, but putting a plan together of how to get there, right? So that could include going to level 1 first, but it may not. A better plan may be just to do that gaps assessment, come up with a plan, and start implementing the different things to become level 2 compliant. And in the process, you'll, if you want to cover all the level 1 controls first, that's certainly a way you can do that. Absolutely.
Not going to hurt you.
No, it's not going to hurt you. Could draw things out a little longer, but, it may or may not be the right way to go. It kind of depends.
Yeah. So how big is the jump from level 1 to level 2?
Quite large. Quite large. There's level 1's nothing to sneeze at. People typically do sneeze at it, and people typically do for level 1. We just got finished recording another episode on level 1 not too long ago. But level 1, people typically phone in. They say, check, we got that right. We're done. Well, do you have a policy? Do you have your authorized list? Do you have, no, I don't, I've got my authorized list. It's Active Directory. No, it's not. That could be part of it, That can be where your list starts, but you got to show where you've categorized people, where you have have somewhere something saying these people are authorized. Level one, there are some things that are required in level one that you actually have to do. You actually have to document. You actually have to prove that that you have logs, for instance. So there are things to implement on level one, but there's 15 or 17, however you look at it, 15 or 17 controls for level one. And somewhere around 59 or so assessment objectives for level one. So, that you've got to do. So that's not that difficult. But then for level two, there's 110 controls and 320 assessment objectives. And, at first glance, looking at some of them, you're like, oh, that's easy. And then you start looking into it, really, really figuring out how you're really going to do that, through all your systems and what's in scope, what's out of scope, and all that kind of fun stuff. It starts getting a little complicated. So, again, that's part of scoping. But level two, there's a lot more to it. So there is a big jump.
So I think we already answered this one earlier, but I'm going to ask it anyway because it is, again, one of the common questions, and that's what we're going over today.
I kind of jumped the gun on this one, I think, but go ahead.
It's all right. It's all right. So the question is, are there not just policy templates that I can use to get this done?
Absolutely, there are policy templates that you can use to get this done, but I would not. There are some that are better than others. I've seen some that people have paid good money for, and they're pretty good templates. I've seen some that people paid pretty good money for that you're like, there's a lot of words on there, but what the heck does it mean? And then I've seen, anyway, they're all over the place. But what's common across all of them is that you'll want to look into that. Then you'll want to match it up with the controls and the assessment objectives. And does the policy cover all that? Between the policy and your SSP, are you going to be able to cover all those assessment objectives? Really, the assessment objectives is what you need to worry about, not the controls themselves necessarily, because if you take care of the assessment objectives, that takes care of the control, right? Mm-hmm. So really, that's what you want to pay attention to. You want to make sure your policy covers all those assessment objectives. Generally, you do them by family. A lot of people will split out access control into several policies because it's kind of a beast. But point is, you'll want to go through each of those policies and make sure that they do address all the controls and all of the assessment objectives properly, and that it fits your environment, right? Because they write them with the whole DIB in mind, not you, mm-hmm. right? And generally, when you get policy templates like that, they're written by someone who doesn't work in the space, somebody that doesn't necessarily do cybersecurity and IT for a medium-sized DIB, right? Medium-sized manufacturer, or especially construction. Talk about redheaded stepchild. That's construction is one of those, because they're you think the manufacturers are in a bad spot in some of this stuff. The contractors, the construction, I should say, construction is they're in a tough spot, with a lot of these things. So, but in any case, it almost certainly does not fit your environment perfectly, and you need to go through those.
What happens when CMMC becomes mandatory, and is it already mandatory?
It is mandatory. There's 4 phases to it. So we're in the first phase. It started on November 10th of 2025. And this first phase ends November 9th of 2026. And phase 2 would begin on November 10th of 2026. So phase 1 is essentially what everybody's doing right now: self-attestation, self-assessment, and reporting your scores. Now there's where there wasn't before, there's now a definite 100% 1,000%, $1,000,000% deadline, to this. It's coming. You know how far away that light is at the end of the tunnel, and it's coming, right? So when phase 2 gets here, it'll be level 2 certifications will start being required on contracts before you can be awarded a contract. So at that point, the rubber's really going to hit the road then, and if you're not ready before then, and you decide, towards the end of this year that, hey, I think it's time to get level 2 certified. Let's do that before November. You're going to be sorely disappointed. It's going to be very tough to make it before November 10th. So if you haven't already started, good luck. It's going to be tough. But November 10th of 2026 is coming. That's when it's required on contracts. So yes, it's required now, but phase 1 is required. Phase 2 is when it's required on contracts. And if you do work for a prime or some other contractor, you're a sub of somebody, they might require it of you sooner than that.
So I think that's all the questions we have for you today, Brooke. And thank you for joining us today, everyone out there. If you have any questions about what we covered, please reach out to us. We're here to help fast track your compliance journey. Text, email, or call in your questions, and we'll answer them for free here on the podcast. You can find our contact information at CMMC ComplianceGuide.com. Stay tuned for our next episode. Until then, stay compliant, stay secure, and make sure to subscribe.